Back in 1986, I was thoroughly convinced that my friend Sam, who was so smart and intellectual, would have been ecstatic about me coming to know the Jesus of the Bible. Well, he wasn't interested in those facts. He wasn't interested in the change that he'd seen in his closest friend, and he wasn't willing to look at the truths of Jesus presented in the Bible the same way that I did. I was encountering a relativistic experience with Sam. What's good for me, keep it to myself and shut up. Well, that really hurt. He was one of my best friends, and I thought he was smart. I thought that the claims of Jesus would have been as clear to him as they were to me. David Pawson explains this conflict and the rationalism, the romanticism, and the relativism that makes people look at Jesus and say, "No, he's not for me. This guy's stupid. Let's crucify this guy. This is guy declaring that he has absolute truth, and if we don't have the Father, then we don't go to heaven." He's not a peacemaker that solves world problems. Let's get rid of this guy. And so to me, that's been really helpful to see David Pawson talk about this in the series that's called Islam, the Challenge to Christianity, Britain's Spiritual Vacuum, Part 1.
Let's look at our mental outlook, because that's even more important than our social life. The way people think, the way their worldview. And I want to mention 3 isms that have profoundly affected the way we think in this country. 500 years ago or so, if you asked anybody in this country, how do you find truth? They would have said very simply, it is revealed by God. Truth comes from Him. And if you say, well, how does it come from Him? They would either say through the Bible, if they were Protestant in Northern Europe, or in Southern Europe, they would say through the church. But however the means, the source was the same. God tells us what is true about our universe, about ourselves, about Him, and that's how you find truth. That is now gone. And 3 isms have destroyed that understanding. The first was rationalism. As part of the Enlightenment, rationalism said truth is discovered by man, not revealed by God. And we discover it with the brain that we have. Our reason finds truth. And only that which is reasonable and can be proved to reason will be accepted as truth. That became, if you can't prove a thing scientifically, it is not true. And so rationalism demanded proof. However, rationalism was cold. It was intellectual. It was cerebral. And there was a reaction against that into what was known as romanticism. Truth is still discovered by human beings, but through their heart rather than their mind, through their emotions rather than their thoughts, through, more intuitive than intellectual. And Romanticism added this dimension that we discover truth not only with the mind but with the heart. But we've moved from that into relativism, which is, to my mind, the greatest difficulty we have to face in our society. Relativism began by believing that truth is discovered not through the heart or mind, but through the will, through choice, through preference. And that led to a complete absence of absolute truth and therefore absolute error. No longer was it true that if this was true, its opposite was false. Black and white became greys of varying shades. Relativism says what is true for you may not be what is true for me. Truth becomes subjective, internal, not out there but in here. And truth is what I believe to be true, what I prefer to be true, what I have found to be true in my experience. And therefore there is very little in common. The most you can do is dialogue about truth and listen to what is true for him and tell them what is true for you. In religion, this has devastating consequences. It means nobody has the truth. All they have is what is true for them. And a Muslim and a Christian can meet, and a Christian can say in dialogue, this is what is true for me, and the Muslim says, and this is what is true for me. And you simply must end up respecting each other's truth. But there is no truth that is true for him and me. You beginning to follow? And relativism then spills over from truth into moral behavior. And there is no absolute right and wrong now. You choose what is right for you. And you don't try and impose that on anybody else. What is right for you may not be right for him. What is wrong for you may not be wrong for him. Truth and ethics become relative, shades of grey. In other words, nobody knows the truth. And therefore, anybody who says, I know the truth, is regarded as a bigot, as somebody who is not with it. What is commended is not saying this is the truth, but saying I'm still searching for the truth. I'm a pilgrim on the way, and that is profoundly acceptable. But to say I've found the truth, or the truth has found me, is very unacceptable. I turn to the religious side of our society, and all this is oversimplified, but I'm just sketching a broad picture of the background to where we're at. There are two isms that have invaded the religious world. The first is pluralism. Now, we are in a plural society. We're in a multicultural, multi-religious society. Many of us for the first time in our lives. But every country is soon going to be multicultural, multi-religious, with different cultures and religions side by side. Immigration and emigration on a vast scale have produced this diversity. But pluralism, that's an ism, goes further. It doesn't just say we've got to live together in peace. It makes a virtue out of different cultures and different religions. It believes that we are all seeking the same ultimate end, that all religions are basically the same quest for truth. Whether they find it or not, we can share this quest together. Pluralism says that all approaches to religion are equally valid and should be accepted as equally valid. And therefore, in a pluralist society, the two major virtues are tact and tolerance. Neither virtue, of course, is mentioned in the Bible, but political correctness is built on these two virtues. In relation to other cultures and other religions, tact and tolerance are the supreme attitudes. The other ism in the religious world is syncretism, and it follows from all the other isms I've mentioned. Syncretism is the coming together of all religions for common purpose. And with that syncretism has come an idea that religion is not for God, it's for man to discover common values and attitudes. The only time I've heard the Duke of Edinburgh preach in church was in St. George's Chapel, Windsor. And I was surprised that he was the preacher. I'd never heard him preach. And his sermon was very simple. Let all the religions of the world come together to save wildlife. And he was a powerful preacher. But it was pure syncretism that for human purposes the religions must get together. The Pope did the same thing by calling representatives of all different religions to Assisi in Italy, made famous by Francis, to pray for world peace. In other words, when religion is seen primarily for human purposes, then people say, why don't the religions get together? Especially, they said, the three monotheistic faiths of Judaism, Christianity and Islam. If they all believe in one God, why can they not get together for the sake of world peace, to save the environment, for social justice, for all the things that would make human life happier and better. In all that discussion, there is no discussion of doing it for God. It is human-centered and oriented. What can all the religions together do for the human race? And if they stay apart, they are preventing those objectives from being achieved. The result is that in the mass media in our country, in BBC and ITV, they no longer make any differentiation between religions when they are planning programs. They talk about the faith community. What does the faith community say about this? What is the faith community? Already they have accepted a syncretistic view of religion. We are all faith people as against non-faith people. And non-faith is defined as the common enemy of faith. And therefore, why can't all believers of different varieties get together to spread faith among the non-faith community and the atheists and agnostics in our country? It was that desire which led Prince Charles to say he wanted to be known as defender of faith. And that was the thinking behind it. For the human purposes of bettering society, it is much better for us to drop our differences and become a solid community of faith to communicate values, personal and public values, to society. And incidentally, before some of you throw that title, Defender of the Faith, at our royal family, you need to remember that the title was given to King Henry VIII by the Pope because he wrote a book against Luther and the Protestant Reformation. So that in its origin, Defender of the Faith means defender of the Catholic faith against Protestants. Naughty me loves telling people in Northern Ireland that. But don't think that it means defender of the Christian faith. It doesn't. But this is the trend of syncretism. The difference is between faith and non-faith. And the faith community is treated as a unit. Well, now all that's very much a thumbnail sketch. Alongside all those isms is a sharp decline in Christianity. I call it a hemorrhage. The church has been hemorrhaging for years now. The Church of England was losing 1,000 people a week, especially young people, and now more particularly, the latest figures show losing men. And that's a very significant point which will come up later. The Methodists were closing 2 church buildings a week. Under 5% of the population attend church weekly. There are some glorious exceptions. There are some lively churches, some a few thousand strong. But when you put them against the background of the population they serve, they are infinitesimal. Yes, you may be able to get a church of 2,000 or 3,000 in London out of 8 to 10 million people. And that's probably the same proportion as a village with 30 attending church. We need to get things in proportion. We tend to focus on the successful churches without looking at the context in which those churches are successful. We need to count not those who come to church, but those who don't. And then we're getting a sober analysis.